Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is an old friend of mine, Joe Peters, who is the Managing Director of iSearch Worldwide KK. Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
Now,
Glad
Joe,
to be here.
You've been in Japan how many years altogether now?
Altogether, 33, 34 years.
Long time.
Long time.
So what brought you to Japan originally? Why is it you're running your own company in Japan?
Well, what brought me originally has nothing to do with running my own company in Japan. Originally, it was courtesy of the Army.
Okay, right.
I had gone through training in the U.S. I requested to be sent to Turkey. And the Army decided that Japan is pretty close to Turkey, I guess. So they sent me here, and I was stationed up in Hokkaido for 3.5 years.
Right.
Once I went back to the U.S., I went into the insurance industry. And one day I applied to a company, Insurance Company of North America, just wrote them out of the blue and said, hey, if you have anything in Japan, I'm interested. Next thing I knew, I was on an airplane to Philadelphia interviewing, a couple of months training there, and right back to Japan. Well, not right back. That was an interval of 9 years. And I came back.
Right.
Stayed here for another 9 years.
So when you came back, you're working for an American insurance company in Japan?
Insurance Company of North America, an American insurance
North America
company,
in Japan.
yes.
Right. Are they still here in Japan? I don't hear that name anymore.
The name is gone. The name became Cigna
Ah, Cigna.
when they merged with the
I was
Connecticut.
spending money with Cigna in my previous iterations here in different companies, so I know the name Cigna, that's for sure.
Well, I got hired away from them by Mutual of Omaha, which was known as United of Omaha, which is also no longer here. Perhaps I'm a curse to these companies.
Finishing them off. So when you were here with your first insurance company of America, was it? The job you had was to do what?
I was in charge of association marketing. We would tie up with different associations using a model that worked well in the U.S., and we tied up with Japanese life insurance companies to offer products to the members of those associations.
So your role in that sense, were you running a team? Were you a sort of individual operator? What was your
A small team. I had a small
You had
team,
a small
a couple of people, yes.
So you've been in the military where you've got, a sort of hierarchy and a system of instruction and people follow orders and presumably they follow orders. And so you've come out of that military, you've been in the private sector in the States, different way of doing things, but you're back here. So what was interesting for you? I presume your team were Japanese members?
Japanese members, yes.
So when you're in the military, it's American, so to speak,
Right.
together, right? So this is your first occasion to be actually leading a Japanese team. So when you think back to that, when you first experience, what were some things that were going through your mind about, oh, this is easy, or this is different, or this is challenging? What was your first encounter with Japanese leadership?
Well, in the interim, I had led a team in the U.S. working for MetLife Insurance.
Okay.
And I had a team of 6 people. I was their manager, and there was a manager above me. So when I came back to Japan, leading a team wasn't new to me. Managing people wasn't new to me, but managing a different culture was new to me. Like anybody who moves to another country, culture shock was there. So I
How
had
did that
to
manifest itself, this culture shock, in terms of the leadership part of things?
sometimes it increased the frustration of not being able to get things done as quickly as a team would do them in the United States, or without having multiple meetings to make a decision before something, and if a decision ever comes about. Luckily, the team that I had here were very good people. They were willing to learn, willing to listen. It was all new to them, and we did make it a successful division of the company.
And so, following that, what happens then after that? You stay in Japan, or you go back to the States?
I joined another insurance company, Mutual of Omaha, known as United of Omaha here, which now is Oryx Insurance. And I stayed here 3 years. Again, I was hired by them to oversee a small department of direct marketing people. Worked out about the same way as the one with Insurance Company of North America. And then I was relocated back to the United States for 3 years. I did not have a team at that time. I had one person who worked under me. but she was an American person, so pretty easy to work as a team, not a problem. But then I got recruited by another insurance company and sent off to Singapore,
Okay.
where managing a team was quite different. I only had one person working for me in Singapore, but I was overseeing 9 countries.
Ah.
And each of those countries, I was overseeing my division in each of those countries.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those countries had a manager and a leader, of course, of their own team. So I got to work across a number of diverse cultures doing that, learning as I went along. My own leader was somebody who was based in Philadelphia, and a dotted line to a fellow in Hong Kong. Very different styles, an American in Philadelphia and a Chinese in Hong Kong, quite different in their leadership styles too. I stayed with that company only 3 years, part of it due to the leadership or lack of leadership, and mostly due to an offer from AXA, the French insurance group, to become regional head of the life insurance area, and then later to become the country manager of Malaysia, and then down as CEO, down to Singapore as CEO for the AXA life insurance operation.
Very well. I mean, you've gone up the ladder pretty quickly, actually.
Pretty quickly.
3 years, that's not bad. From, you know,
Well, it was actually,
I'm the CEO, that's pretty good.
it was actually more like 15 years if we add all those together.
Okay, all right.
More than that, in fact. 6 years, yes, about 15 years. And then another 3. So it was a fairly quick rise. But once I was CEO in Singapore, I was leading a team of 150 people.
Wow.
So
okay, that's a big team.
that's a big one. But I didn't need all of those people reporting to me. I didn't want them all reporting to me. My job in Singapore was to take over an old, very Chinese life insurance company and turn that around into a money-making Western type of company. So I had to hire a number of people. I had to fire a few. I'm a bit Machiavellian when it comes to firing people, I guess you might say. Machiavelli was a very strict leader for anybody who's read any of his philosophies. But I subscribe to that a bit. If you're going to do something, just get it done.
Okay.
Don't drag it out. But do it in the least painful way to people. We're not in this world to injure others or to create any more grief than they might already have. So be fair. I tried to be as fair as I could to everybody. And the team that I built was a very good team. And I allowed them to manage. I didn't sit on their shoulder telling them this is what you have to do every day.
So that's Singapore. When did you get back to Japan?
2002.
Okay, in what context do you come back to Japan?
I was offered the role of president and managing director of an insurance marketing operation, a Dutch company at that time. And I had been in Singapore.
You come straight in as president in Japan. This is not bad, right?
Yes.
This is a very good position. And you've been in Japan before, so it's not new to you. And you've been through some of those cultural adaptations that we go through. So when you came into Japan this time, and you're coming back as the president, what was going through your mind in terms of what you needed to do for yourself as a leader to make this work?
I used a lot of the practices that I had used in Singapore. I'm a people-oriented person. Again, I had to change a couple of the positions, bring in people who were more competent, eliminate the people who weren't doing the job. I'm not the type person who comes in and immediately jumps in doing that. I will wait a while. I'll test the people out. I'll talk to them. I'll watch what they're doing. I'll give them advice, give them training, counsel them where necessary. And if they're still not making it, then I'll tell them, I'm sorry, but it's just not working out.
Telling people goodbye, sayonara, in Singapore is one thing. Here, this is interesting for our viewers overseas, that incompetence is not a valid reason for dismissal in Japan, which is always, when you hear that, you're like, wow, okay, but that's the reality. So how did you go about getting people out? Because it's not so easy to do that. And how big was the size of the company you were running?
That company was much smaller than what I had run in Singapore. It was only 21 or 22 people.
So if it was 200 people, eliminating people, I think, would be a lot harder. Maybe 20 people, maybe is a bit more tolerance for that here, smaller companies.
Less tolerance.
Yeah.
In Singapore, I had an HR team who was able to handle those sort of things for me. I didn't have to get directly involved.
Mm-hmm.
In Japan, I had a part-time HR person, so I was much more involved in that. And I made sure that I was aware of what's required, what's not required, how to handle these things. As you said, it's very, very difficult. One of the people I still remember that I needed to change to a new person sat at home for about 6 months.
Wow.
Doing nothing.
Wow.
Getting paid his full salary.
What year is this?
This was around 2003.
Okay, so we've come out of the bubble. The bubble's crashed.
Mm-hmm.
We've come out of the dot-com collapse, boom's gone bust there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's before Lehman. So you're in a bit of a spot there between the dot-com bust and Lehman.
Yes.
Right.
I wanted to get rid of this person, but as you said, it's extremely difficult. He was a very incompetent person.
Mm-hmm.
He was also misusing company funds. Even that is not a reason for dismissal
no
in
problem
Japan.
in Japan. Incompetent, misusing company funds, no reason to sack
No,
anybody.
that's fine. Just give him a warning, reduce his pay by 10%. My head office wouldn't accept that.
Well, your head office was Dutch, right?
It was Dutch, but I was reporting to the division in the U.S., to somebody on the East Coast of
Because
the
normally
U.S.
with people who are Dutch nationals, they tell me that their culture is quite businesslike, quite direct, and probably not so much in the putting up with misusing company funds and being incompetent type of people too easily.
There were a couple of other things that he did too. I won't go into those. But in the end, as I said, he wound up staying at home for 6 months, getting full pay, and then he got about a year's worth of pay as his dismissal amount. So anybody who is going to run an operation, lead an operation in Japan, you need to be aware of these HR pitfalls because they're real and they still exist even today. In my current company, I've only had that problem once, where I had somebody who was extremely incompetent, who is a very irrational type of person, and I wound up paying that person 6 months to get them to resign. You can't fire them; they have to resign.
Okay.
And
Well,
sometimes
there's
it's
also a thing
costly.
here about if they are fired, then they can access a government insurance program for get salary equivalent for some period of time.
Yes,
It's not extensive; it's not that long, but still they get some
about
money.
half a year.
Yeah, right. So there's some people want to be fired. No, I want to be fired so I can access this, as opposed to if I resign, I can't access it. So sometimes it's a choice they make, and in my case, I'll offer them a choice. I say, again, we're not here to hurt people.
Right.
It's not working, or the company situation is such that we have to make a change. Which is better for you? Would you like me to fire you officially, or would you prefer to resign? It's totally up to you. I'm easy either way. What do you want? And some people say, I'll resign. Other people say, I want to get fired. So there is that. So what was about the other people in the company? So the other people in the company noticed that this person's at home for 6 months. How's their reaction? Are they thinking, well, that's good, because they were incompetent and they weren't a good team player and they really didn't fit here, and we're seeing the company take the right action? Or are they sitting there thinking, oh, geez, they might do that to me? I mean, how was the reaction around the other people? Because you're new, relatively speaking. I mean, I know you took your time, but still, they probably don't know you that deeply yet, and you take this action, they're wondering, am I going to be the next, and my head's on the chopping block? You've always got that issue. What do you think?
I made sure that they understood that it was due to this person's actions.
And how did you make them understand that? Was it one-on-one discussions?
No, I did a general meeting with people, yes.
Okay.
But the general staff didn't get all of the details, of course, but the senior management team was made aware of it, and they could pass the word down, or they could be the buffer between me and the rest of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem using buffers like that. I think it's important to allow management to lead their own team. And leading by example is another thing that I also believe in. I don't like toxic leadership. That happens too often. We've seen that in companies here in Japan especially. But to help the people understand that they weren't in any jeopardy, I did talk to them. Some was one-on-one, some of them were one-on-one, but mostly it was in the group.
One thing I think is important for leadership in Japan, when you have these cases where someone's actually being removed, that if you don't address it either one-on-one or in some sort of format with everyone together, then rumours abound and a whole bunch of misinformation can appear, and you lost control of the narrative around the reasoning behind this. So, I think, for me too, whenever we have, doesn't happen very often, but whenever we have a situation where someone's leaving, I have to explain to everybody, this is nothing about you. You're okay. This is about them.
Right.
We're going forward. We're growing. We're expanding. Just to reassure people, and that they know directly from me. And we don't have such a big company, so it's easy to do. If I had 200 people, it might be a different situation. And I wish I had 200 people, but we'll get there. But still, I think that you can't just disappear people and say nothing. And I have had cases. I do executive coaching for different people, and I've had cases where people I've been coaching have not understood that. And they just disappear people and don't say anything. I don't think that's a good practice. I think you really have to, because people get worried,
They do. I agree.
Is this the canary in the coal mine, and am I next? Am I going to be a survivor or not? And you've got to address that.
In my company today, we do that. If somebody is leaving either of their own accord or because we have asked them to leave because they're not meeting their goals, I announce it to everybody when the time comes. And I will ask the person who is leaving to be there, and I'll announce that so-and-so has decided to leave the company. We want to thank this person for what they've contributed, for the benefits they've been to the company, and a bit of applause. So they're not walking out, slamming doors and walking out with burned bridges behind them.
Sabotaging everything.
That's right.
That. And so you're now the president. You've sort of worked out who's who in the company and who you need and who you don't need, who you get replacements for. And so you're leading the team. It's 20 odd people. So there's probably not a lot of middle management in that equation for the buffer. Really. It's a bit thinner this time. But what was your, what was your strategy coming into the job, knowing that you're going to make some changes? But how did you think about how do I get people to follow me? How do I make sure that they they're on song with me and what we're trying to do here?
I've generally followed the same pattern, whichever company I've gone into. I will have one-on-one sessions with the people who are in management or middle management, especially if they're reporting to me. We'll talk about what they're doing, what they would like to do, any issues they're having. And I really listen to these things. I'm not just doing this to be nice to them. And if there are issues that I can help them resolve, things that are happening, I will do that. The one thing that I've always told every manager working for me is that you can come to me with complaints. You can tell me you don't like my ideas. You can make suggestions. You can ask me to try something differently. I might or I might not do it. But one thing I want you all to know, in the end, I'm the head of this company and I will make the final decision. I will also take any backlash that comes out of that decision. I don't pass it on down to the people working under me. I don't say, well, Suzuki-san over here didn't do this or Yamada-san did this. I'm the one who made that decision. I'll take the blame for it. But if there's glory to be had for it, I'm going to share that. I'm not going to take all that and say, ooh, it was me, it was me. It
Which
was
is
my
often,
people.
The case, isn't it?
Right.
Hero, leader. And the thing in that equation is interesting for me because often leaders will say, open door policy, anyone can come and see me anytime. No one goes to see them. Happy to have your ideas. Nobody puts up their ideas because the trust isn't there. I haven't built a relationship. So, when we make these pronouncements, we think, well, good, that's done. But on the other side, how do you actually get them to believe what you're telling them is actually true?
Well, you can only get people to believe if you show them. Telling them you're going to do something, telling them that you will take the blame, telling them that you will give the glory to them, they're not going to believe that until they really see it happen. So you have to make sure that you're promising what you can deliver. Don't overpromise, underdeliver. It's the other way around. Always
so,
the other way around.
How long were you in the Dutch company? For how many years?
I only stayed with them for 4 years.
Right. And then what happens?
Prior to that time, I had already decided that I had had enough of the industry, 32 years in that industry. And I also had a new leader who was based in Hong Kong that was probably the worst leader I've ever met, the worst person to work for I've ever met.
I had one of those too, and he was based in Hong Kong as well. There must be something about Hong Kong.
Something in the water there.
Something in the water there, right?
I guess.
Yeah. And he drove me out of the corporate world, I can tell you.
That's what happened. I just couldn't take it anymore. I talked to, he wasn't my boss. The guy in the US was still my boss, but this guy had a lot of influence and couldn't be relied upon. So I put in my resignation. They asked me to stay until they found somebody else. And I said, fine, I'll do that. I'll help find somebody. I'll interview people. So once the time came for me to leave, I had already started iSearch. And I told them I've started another company.
And this is a recruiting business.
This is a recruiting business.
So why did you choose to go from the insurance business you've been in for 30 odd years into a brand new business you know nothing about? How does that work?
A question that many people have asked me. I was wondering what to do. I was thinking, should I just retire, stay in Japan, move back to the US? Japan is a better option.
How many years ago are we talking now when you started iSearch?
How many years?
Years ago is this?
20 years.
So you've been doing this now for 20 years?
I've owned the recruiting company for 20 years.
There, Joe. You just keep moving it down the road there.
Yes.
Right.
But I started iSearch 20 years ago.
Right. Well done.
It's a long time. For a recruiting company in Japan, a small company, it is a long time to be in business. When I was thinking about what to do, I talked to a fellow that I knew, and he said, why don't you get into the recruiting business? You're good with people, you know HR, you know how to build companies, you know how to manage companies and people. I said, never thought about that. Let me take a look into it. I did. I said, this sounds interesting. I went for a couple of weeks of training to learn the basics.
Training? I mean, you're starting your own company. Where on earth do you go for training to become a recruiter?
You're never too old to learn.
But I'm just saying, as a individual operator, owner of your company, you're going to start, like, for example, if I decided I'm going to start a recruiting company, well, who on earth would I go to be trained? I mean, they're all running their own companies or they're big established businesses. They're going to help me. So where do you get training from?
You find somebody that you know who's been doing it for a number of years.
Okay, so it's a sort of individual arrangement.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
It's an individual arrangement. It might be a group of people. There are a lot of training courses for recruiters.
Is there? Oh, okay.
There are many, many. Some are in person, some are by video, some are on the internet.
Okay.
I selected somebody that I knew who was in the business, spent a couple of weeks there learning what recruiting is all about, what running a recruiting business is about. Running a business is not so different, any business. Doesn't matter whether you've got 6 people working for you or 600 people working for you. The issues are pretty much the same, something that I've found over the years.
Exactly, yeah.
So I decided, I'll go ahead and start a recruiting company. It was me and an assistant.
So here's a big question. You're a foreigner. You're in Japan. You're going to start from scratch with your one assistant, right? Every kid in this country is taught to go and join a big Japanese company because they're safe and sound, and you get on the you know, on the wheel there, and after 40 years you become butcher or division head or something, you know,
Right.
you know, and foreign companies, risky, big foreign brand names, okay, Google, you know, something like Apple or something, that's a different story, but a small one-man show. How on earth did you convince people to come and work and take the risk to come and work for you? Because when we started this company in 2007, even though Dale Carnegie had been in Japan for, you know, now 61 years this year, we were a new franchise taking over from an existing franchise, so we had to sort of start from scratch. And trying to convince people, like Dale Carnegie is a brand name, global, but still, you know, the grandparents are very interested in what the, you know, grandchild's doing, and the parents are interested in the wife or husband are interested in what the other party's doing, and everyone's got an opinion. Sometimes quite hard to get people to quit the so-called security of what they're doing to come and take the risk. So how did you manage that?
You're talking about hiring people for my own company or getting
Hiring
candidates
for
to go to
no,
other
for
companies?
Your company, your new startup, getting people to come on board, that is not an easy task.
Not easy. And I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning.
Like what?
Hiring people who thought or sold me a good story about being good recruiters, who in reality were just looking for a base. So it didn't take long to burn through several million yen and find out, I messed up. These are not people I should have been hiring. I at one point had 20 some odd people working for me.
Wow, you built it up.
I built it up. Now we have 12. And the people who are working with us now have been there 8 years, 9 years, 10 years.
So they're solid.
I got smarter about the kind of people that I would hire.
Here's an irony. Tell me this. I was talking to a friend recently who also has a recruiting company, who said to me that he downsized the company. I can't remember if it was 20 or 30, maybe it was 30, and it was 25 or something, down to like 15 or something. And he said he's making more money, making more profit. Like he'd sort of, you know, the scale sucks up the dough. And even though you got 20 odd, 30 odd people, you're actually making less money when you halve the size. So that was, well, okay, that's interesting.
And that's because when a new recruiter first starts, it will typically take them 6 months, maybe a bit more, before they've made their first placement. And then it's another 1, 2, 3 months before the money comes in. So you're looking at about 9 months of paying somebody a base. Most of them are not going to work for commission only. They want a base, whether that's 200, 300, 400,000 yen, whatever that might be. It's sucking the money out of the company, of course, until they finally start generating something. And it's typically a year and a half, 2 years before they're actually making something more than their base. So it's a long road. We are now
long and painful.
Very painful, financially, painful mentally, physically, not so much physically. So I made a lot of mistakes hiring people. I could look at my ex-employees list. It's much bigger than my current employees list.
And the irony is, you know, you're in the recruiting business, right? So it's presumably, and we're in the training business, the people business. So presumably, as leaders, we should know what the hell we're doing. We should know about the people, but we still sometimes get the wrong people, or just it's not a fit, or it's not productive, or whatever. Right? It still happens.
We have over the years developed I won't call it a test, but it's a series of questions and information that we go through for every person. And we don't do that just once. We have 3 or 4 of our team do it and put their information down. It's a set series of questions. It's sort of a psychological test that we have developed on our own. And if we don't all agree at the end of that to this person's responses, or our gut feeling too sometimes, about whether this will be the right match for us, we don't hire the person now.
Because actually, if you get the wrong hire, it's expensive in terms of management time. It's expensive in terms of lost revenues. It's expensive in terms of client relationships. It's like the downside of getting it wrong is very high.
Very high in our business. The Our motto is recruiting with integrity. So that's one of the things that we really look for in the people we're bringing in. What's their integrity like? Are they going to get on the phone and call candidates making up stories? Or I had one guy one time, he called a company and I could overhear him. I heard him saying, "Oh, I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't speak Japanese, and my boss doesn't speak Japanese. Is there somebody in your company who is an engineer who can speak English?" I listened to it. I didn't cut him off during the call, but after his call, I invited him into my office. And I asked him, I said, why were you saying things like that? None of it's true. He said, "Oh, wow, that's HR. I'm talking to HR. I have to make up stories to get to them." I said, "No, you don't. HR is probably the easiest department in any company to get through to and to talk to somebody. We don't lie in this company. We don't make up stories."
No integrity.
No integrity and no job for him anymore after that. He was not a good producer, and he didn't work for us very long after that.
Well, some of the stories you hear from some of the recruiting companies here are quite horrific in terms of the lengths people, because they're really under the gun to produce income quickly. It's a bit of a meat grinder, and so it produces extreme behaviour. And I often think about the brand damage of that behaviour. You know, okay, you're grinding them out here, squeezing the dough out, but your actually brand is being destroyed at the same time. But anyway, I digress from the topic of leadership. So,
well, it all has to do with leadership, because if the person leading the company doesn't have that integrity,
that's right.
Your business, my business, many businesses, then that's the kind of person they're going to hire.
I know you may know. You're right. I stand corrected. You raise a good point, because then the others in the company see and observe what's going on there.
Yes.
And they see, okay, well, Joe has talked about integrity and he's walking the talk. So now I understand where the standard is for this company and where I have to fit in with it.
Right.
I think that's important. Similarly, like sometimes we'll have situations where there's money involved, and I will say no, we're not going to do that for whatever reason it might be. But it comes down this type of what do we stand for? Integrity, best interest of the client.
Yes.
And that company does not need our training. That is not their issue. And yes, you can give them training. It'll have no impact whatsoever and just cost money and hurt our brand. Don't go there. But it's like, this is dough, right? It's not theoretical. This is practical, real money.
Yes.
But when you do that, then people realize, okay, we are looking for the best interest of the client. We're not just trying to scam the money or scoop up the money and run away with it. We're actually here for the long term too, because it's sending a good message about your overall strategy and long-term time in the market plan too. So you've been doing that now for 20 years, running your own company. So if you think about your previous experiences in Japan, and if you're going to give someone advice on how to engage team members, how to get people behind your direction as a leader, what things have you found work well to get people engaged?
Integrity, as I said, I'll bring that up again because I think that's important for the leader to have. And as you said, people have to see that. If they see that you make up stories, you lie, you don't keep your word, then they're going to do the same thing, or they don't want to work for you. So that's one of the points. Being open with people. You don't need to share as a leader every little thing about the company. There are certain things that people would worry about if you shared everything. But as the leader, you're responsible for making sure those things don't harm your company, don't harm your people. You might have to do it quietly in the background, and you get no glory for that. You get no recognition for that. That's okay. That's not why you're in a leadership position. You're not there to wear a crown.
Yeah.
You don't suddenly jump in and change things operationally just because things are going down. I've seen people do that. Well, things are not working out so well. We're having a little bit of a tough time. Hey, let's have unlimited vacation days. really? Well, you're just paying me for the days that I've earned anyhow, right? So how is that an operational change going to make this problem go away or anything happen? You talk to the people that count, and you allow them to talk to the people who are under them, or you ask them to. We went through that last week as we were doing our annual planning for next year, and there will be some changes. So the managers in charge of those people, it's their responsibility to talk to the people under them, not my responsibility. I don't come in and usurp their authority or their power. If they have an issue with it, they can bring it to their manager, who can then bring it to me. And if we need to, I don't meet with somebody's team one-on-one.
Right.
I want the manager involved.
Right.
Because I'm not trying to go around and do a play behind that manager's back. That's not something I ever recommend to.
Yeah, and
that's
Japan,
poor leadership.
In Japan, particularly,
Yes.
when leaders come in from outside and they start, management by wandering around, if you remember that.
Yes.
And start talking to the division heads or the section heads, staff directly. They start to panic,
Yes.
They start thinking, what are my people saying about me to the
Right.
boss, or
Right.
what sort of secret discussions are going on between the boss and my people, and why am I cut out of it? And you start to create, uncertainty and anxiety for no good reason, But I think you still can tell your division heads or section leaders from time to time, I will reach out and talk with people just to get some feedback on how they're going, but you're still in charge. I'm not trying to go around you, but I just, I want to get some feedback from them. Okay, I'll do that. I think if you do it that way, you can get around it. But when you don't do that, just suddenly
Right.
talking to people, that's when people start to really get upset and worry.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now.
And I have done it that way. I've had managers come to me and say, how about if you talk to this person?
Yeah, that's right.
So fine, do you want to sit in while we're talking? No, you just go ahead and do it. But I'll make sure that that person understands that your manager has asked me to talk to you. These are the issues they see. Would you like to have the manager sit in on this? And if they say yes, then I'll ask the manager, please come and sit in. Otherwise, I won't. I'm also careful about who I'm in a room with sometimes. In these days of various harassments in Japan,
Right.
we have bullying, we have power harassment, we have sexual harassment, all kinds of claims that people can make. And who's to say you're sitting in a room with one person, I'm sitting in a room with one person, and that person suddenly says something. As we know, the regulators in Japan tend to side more with the employees than they do with the employer. So as a leader, you also have to be careful, I think. It's not you can, well, I'm the leader, I can do anything I want. No, you can't. So.
No, you can't. So, okay. In terms of often when we're the leader, we have access to a lot of information. We understand what's going on very well. We're often connected through chambers of commerce industry associations, with the broader market, industry, whatever. And we're often, as foreigners, we're often accessing, English language content as well as maybe Japanese language content here. So often we are the generator of ideas. We get ideas, let's do this. But what have you found works well to get ideas from the bottom to come up, to get people to raise their hand and put up their idea and get encouraged to share that with others? What have you found works well to get ideas from the team?
That's tougher here in Japan than it is in most countries.
And why is that?
I think some of it is people are afraid that their idea will be shot down, and they don't want that to happen in front of their peers. That would make them look bad. Or they might present an idea that doesn't work out so well, which could also make them look bad. Nobody likes to be on the losing end of the stick. And nobody likes to be embarrassed in front of their peers. So rather than risk that, it's easier just to sit there and be quiet and do nothing and say nothing. I've been fortunate in the company I have now, of course, people are not afraid to speak up because most of them are not Japanese.
Okay.
So with a lot of foreign-owned recruiting firms, you'll find that not that many are Japanese recruiters.
Right.
But
And why is that?
I don't think Japanese see it as a super stable job. Although, as I said, we've had people in their roles for 10 years here and working with iSearch, some more than 10 years. I think they also don't see it as being a big name. If we're talking one of the big name companies, sure, they'll go there. But I also know what the churn rate is like in some of those companies.
Churn and burn.
Churn and burn, or burn and churn sometimes.
Yeah.
But they're not working for a big name. Their families might say, "Oh, why are you working for that little company? Why are you?" Nobody knows who they are.
Is this going to be okay? You're bankrupt, you lose
Right.
your job,
Yeah, and that happens. It does happen. But getting people to raise their hand in the previous companies, because I worked in foreign-owned companies, it wasn't quite as difficult as it is in a pure Japanese company. I've never worked in a purely Japanese company, so I'm saying that without any authority behind it, but that's my opinion. I think that people will make comments. Again, you might have to talk with them a bit beforehand, before the meeting, before the group. And ask them,
perhaps?
warm them up a little bit.
Yeah, bit of groundwork before the
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah, you've got to have the name Oashi in there sometimes. I agree. People have good ideas, and I've had people come up to me after meetings and with a good idea. Well, why didn't you bring that up at the meeting? Oh, well, I didn't want to say that in front of everybody. And maybe you could bring it up. So,
Yes, that's right.
Sure, yeah.
I think that's a different thing, isn't it? I mean, any time you're in a meeting room in Japan, as foreigners, we've grown up with debate.
Yes.
We've grown up with the free flow of ideas on the fly. We've grown up with put your ideas up without fear.
Right.
But for Japanese, they're looking around the table going, oh, well, so-and-so joined the company before me, so I should defer to them. So-and-so's older than me, so I should defer to them, or often in the case for gender, oh, that's a man, I'm a woman, I should defer to the man. So they're sort of suppressing themselves. So that's one of those issues around ID generation in Japan, which is quite different to Western countries.
I'll tell you a little anecdote about what happened to me personally.
Yeah, tell us.
My boss was here from the US. One of the consultants was in, and the consultant told me, he said, here's some questions that I would like to know from our partner company, which was a major Japanese insurance company. So, okay, these are pretty basic questions, fine. You talked about Nemawashi earlier. You talked about being prepared for meetings and I mentioned not embarrassing anybody in the meeting. So we were sitting in this meeting. It was I call it a green tea meeting. Oh, we're having a nice little chat here while we drink our green tea. Nothing serious is going on. And the meeting went for about half an hour. We had some pretty senior people from the Japanese insurance company partner. And everybody started this. They were getting up. I said, "Chotomatte kudasai, just a moment. I have some questions I'd like to ask." And I saw people going like this. What? Okay. So I asked my questions. I got answers. We got answers. The next day, I got a scathing email from the partner, the Japanese insurance company partner. And he basically said to me, "Don't you ever do that to us in a meeting again." I said, "What? What did I do?" "You asked questions we had not heard before and we were not prepared to answer."
And also, they're the seniors in the company, and it's not their job to answer your basic questions either. It's like an insult, isn't it, from a Japanese point of view?
Yeah.
You know, there's always a thing, with leadership, with the senior levels. Nothing concrete's going to come out of that discussion, because the people who need to make the recommendations do the due diligence right down the bottom.
Yep.
But you've got to start the process from the top. But they're just going to wait till the research is done, the reports are made, the due diligence covers it off, and it gets to a decision point at their level. But you're asking the top people basic questions. You can imagine
that they couldn't answer at the time.
Well, yeah. Thought, why are we being asked these questions anyway? Not our job to answer these basic questions.
Well, they could have said good questions, and we will research that and get back to you. But instead, he took it as an opportunity to really burn me for that.
Stick the boot in, yeah, okay.
And I had to write a letter of apology to him. I'm president of the company, but I've got to write him a letter of apology. So that's something else that leaders in Japan need to understand. You don't embarrass the other people in the meeting by doing something like that.
And I think also, like for Japan, their concept is a little bit different to ours. We're looking for the right answer.
Yes.
They're looking for the right question.
Yeah.
Now, when you understand that difference, you realize Western business has got a lot to learn from Japan. Like, we're worried about, let's come up with the perfect answer and get going. And they're thinking, well, if we get the right question isolated out, and we work on that, then the real answer we need will come, as opposed to an answer will come. So there's a logic to it, isn't there, in a way? So in terms of building trust, what about building trust with people? What have you found works well building trust in Japan?
Again, it's much of what I've covered already, letting people know that you have to show them, let them know, not just let them know, show them that they can trust you. And that means if they tell you something in confidence, you don't run out there and start spreading the word around, even to your best friend.
Yeah.
Because you never know when that's going to come back to bite you in the behind.
Well, do you think there's any secrets here? I mean, I always think to myself, this company, everybody knows everything. Anything going on, it's the sort of, what do we call it? The grapevine works pretty well in Japan, and people
works extremely well.
Extremely well. And so you think, something's going to be isolated. No, everybody knows every damn thing. So, you can't think like that. I spoke to this one person. It's not going further than that. I don't think so.
They might think that way, but as long as they know, if you told me something and I'm in a leadership position, I go around telling my managers or a few other people or my secretary about that, and then the word gets down, they're not going to trust me. But if it's people at their own level who are spreading this around, talking, having a beer after work, or just chatting over lunch, that's okay. They can do that because they don't have to pay any consequences for doing it.
Yeah.
As the leader, we pay the consequences if they find out it was us. You can't tell Joe that. He'll tell everybody. You know how he is.
Yeah.
The other thing, again, I mentioned earlier, leading by example. That's part of leading by example. It's difficult. It takes time to build trust here. in Japan.
I think also being predictable, consistent are key features, and having your emotions under control. Like, we teach leadership, right? We talk about this, that whatever's going on, what's on your face is what everyone's reading.
Yeah.
And every single person in your company is an absolute ninja level expert boss watcher.
Yeah.
You change the gait by how you walk, for expression on your face. They're reading it, And I had occasion recently, I was under a lot of stress, and I didn't see what was on my face. I didn't say anything. I was just at my desk working, and one of my team came and said, "You okay?" They saw my face, and they could see I was under stress because my facial expression, I didn't think like that because I couldn't see my face. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, you've got to be a better actor here, Greg, and control this a bit more. But they're watching us very, very carefully. So if we can't control our temper, if we have unpredictable behaviour, if we're inconsistent in the things we say we're going to do and what we actually do, then that people note that, and how do you build trust on that basis? And so you've got to be like that as the swan with the gliding across the surface of the water, and the legs are going crazy underneath. The web feet are working hard, but everything looks fine on the top.
People are very observant. I don't think it's just Japan. I think that's true anywhere.
That's true.
But especially here, and especially if you're a foreigner and your team is Japanese, you get watched a lot closer.
Yeah.
But it's also pretty surprising sometimes how closely the managers are watched and what people are observing and the comments they might make. You have to be able to, you know the phrase in Japan as well as I do, read the air.
Yeah, kukyo-yomu.
Kukyo-yomu, yes. You have to be able to read the air. And the other term that I think is important in Japanese, you're talking about the face, is the harage. People don't come out and say things all the time, but they will give you a little bit of a clue, and you've got to be able to pick up on that.
Well, that's the thing about Japanese. If you and I sat down and said, "Hey, Joe, let's design a language which is going to have masses of nuance and subtlety, and nothing easily comes out direct, and a simple sentences like 5 words in English takes like 15 words in Japanese to express the same thing."
Right.
Japanese language we'd come up with, because it is very nuanced, it's very subtle, and a lot of stuff's unsaid.
Yes.
It's sort of hinted at but not fleshed out, whereas in English it's quite direct. We say what we think and it's clear and people understand it. But Japanese, wow. And I think, you speak Japanese, I speak Japanese,
yes.
But I'm not Japanese.
Right, same.
So I'm not getting the 100% of the communication piece coming from someone speaking in Japanese as a native speaker would get. And when my vocabulary as a non-native speaker of Japanese naturally is quite limited. So you tend to be quite direct with the limited vocabulary you've got compared to a Japanese person who can have the nuance and the subtlety much more easily. So yeah, that makes it a bit harder.
I think that's why so many of the people in leadership positions here need good secretaries who can be that buffer, a good personal assistant secretary, be that buffer, get to know the person they're working for, and help them to be understood or to understand. I was in another meeting one time where we had a professional interpreter sitting in the meeting. And she was just botching the whole thing. I finally had to stop her and say, "That's not what was said. Here's what was said."
Wow.
And from that point on, when somebody would say something, before she would interpret, she would look at me and I'd say, "You're the interpreter."
Try and get it right this time.
Yeah, you do it. Yeah. I'm president of the company. You're the interpreter. Please go ahead and do this. We never used her as an interpreter again, by the way.
That's probably a wise decision.
Yeah.
What about culture? You built your company from zero. So you are the author, architect, the construction machine to put that culture into play. And things change. Things change every time. But if you think about how to build a culture in a company, what things have you found works well?
What? Sorry?
To build a culture in a company, what things work well have you found?
Knowing what culture you want, first off, helps. Do you want a culture where people can pick up the phone and lie to anybody they want to, make up stories? Or do you want a culture where integrity is important? Do you want a culture where people can perform at 50% and still be with you? Or do you want 90%, 100%? So you have to understand what it is you're looking for, what kind of a culture you're planning to build. As you said, that changes over time. In the beginning, I mentioned earlier, I made a lot of mistakes. The people I hired were not the right culture. They were not a cultural fit. The people that have come in the last few years, most of them are not Japanese, but they have been a good cultural fit.
Is that because you found it easier to hire foreigners rather than Japanese? Or is that because you found working with foreigners yourself as a foreigner was easier than leading Japanese? Why don't you have more of a mix of Japanese and foreigners? Why is that evolved like that?
I did hire a few Japanese people over the years. And the main reason they didn't work out, in my mind, is because they weren't really salespeople, even though they had a sales title before joining us. Recruiting is selling.
But that's not surprising, Joe. I mean, there's no sales training in this country apart from on-the-job training, where you go with your boss to 2 meetings, and then good luck, And if your boss is mediocre and a bit of a dud as far as a salesperson goes, well, what's your nihon? What's your modeling here?
Right.
It's not surprising, is it?
Well, in recruiting, we are doing a lot of selling. We sell clients that they should use our company. We sell candidates that here's a good opportunity for you. Selling is part of it, convincing is part of it. But I also found that a lot of these so-called salespeople were people who were sitting at their desk waiting for the phone to ring.
They're farmers, not hunters.
They're farmers, not hunters. Exactly, that's what I was going to say, the term we use. And we need hunters.
You need hunters,
And many recruiters in Japan come from a background of coming here and teaching English first. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is there are a lot of them who come here and they like Japan. They decide they want to stay. And many of them don't have Japanese language abilities in the beginning. So jobs they can do are recruiting. One of the jobs that they can do. We have hired many of them. Several of the people who work for us now came from that background. But if they also have some sales in their background, or if they were an Eagle Scout or they had something, one of the questions we always ask the potential recruiter is, tell me about a time in your life when you overcame some adversity and how you did it. I want to know, have you had a tough time? How did you overcome it? And we've got, as I said earlier, we've got a whole list of questions we go through before somebody can even begin to think about working for us. So we're slow to hire. We're also now slow to fire.
Okay.
In the beginning, I was quick to hire, quick to fire. That cost me a lot of money.
Move slowly in the right direction.
Yeah.
So, Joe, if someone rang you up and said, hey, Joe, look, I've been appointed to the head of my organization in Japan. I'm going to be arriving shortly. I want to be successful as a leader in Japan. What advice would you give me? What would you tell them?
To be successful in Japan?
As a leader in Japan, yeah. They don't know Japan. They don't speak Japanese. They're being sent here by their company. And you're going to give them some advice on how to be successful.
First of all, don't think you're going to come in here and change things overnight. Years ago, I was sitting in the American Club, sitting at one of the counter having lunch. This was in the old American Club.
Oh, the old one, yeah, I remember the old one.
I remember the counter downstairs.
Yep.
And there was a fellow sitting 2 stools over from me talking to another guy. And I knew from what he was saying that he'd only been here a month or less. And he was telling this guy, I'm going to show him how to do things. I'll get things changed. And I almost fell off my stool wanting to laugh. But I held it in and I was being nice. I said, good luck with that.
Let's talk in a month and see how that's worked out for you.
So you got to come in here with that attitude. You're not going to make overnight changes. If changes at all will be made, they'll be made slowly. And the reason I say if at all, A lot of times companies send people in here on the old 2 to 3 year contract.
Yep.
You may have come here that way. I came here that way in the beginning. The Japanese staff who are working for you know that. They've seen it. He's going to be here 2 years. He'll be gone. We'll pretend like we're going along with this for now. And then in 2 years, he'll be gone. We'll have somebody else. And we can just keep doing what we're doing. So the frustration then starts to build for this new leader. Learn what your people do. Learn how they do it. Learn why they do it. And it may not be for any reason you've ever heard before. It may not be how it's done in the home office. Stop using the phrase, well, back in headquarters, back in America, we did it this way. Well,
good luck with
guess what? You're not in America anymore.
Also, I think probably a lot of that is if you're not talking to the customers or the clients, what's your basis of any sort of reality check on your ideas? And your people have built up these long-term, deep relationships with buyers, and you turn up and you look like you're going to screw it up for everybody. You can bet they're going to keep you as far away from those customers, clients as they possibly can.
Yes.
So if you have some insight into this is why have we got to do it like that? Well, the customer wants it. Like, well, the customer should adjust to what we do.
Exactly.
Actually, we're not going to change the packaging or the sizing or the color or the weight. No, you've got to sell it as it is. Okay, well, if you actually talk to the customer, you might find out that there's maybe an option here that's unknown to headquarters. It may be an option that you could take globally as an improved functionality, but because you're sort of bullheaded about it, you're not thinking about what's actually their side of the fence of what's going on. You miss that, so I think that's part of it too, isn't it?
Yeah, there are companies, a new leader can come here, but if he doesn't have or she doesn't have that support from the headquarters to make those changes of their product or of their process to adapt to what's needed in Japan, they're never going to be successful. There's one company that I know here, it's a French company. I don't know if we want to use company names in this.
It's up to you, Joe.
Okay.
Whatever you like.
Le Creuset.
Le Creuset.
I'm sure you know.
Got a big heavy Le Creuset.
The big heavy Le Creuset pots. And they had a lady here, Monica.
Oh, I know Monica.
You know Monica, all right?
Yeah, I know Monica.
She did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of turning things around, using the adaptations that were needed to adapt their product and their packaging to the Japan market. She even went to South America where they were making some of their product, had them change the line where they were making things. She changed the packaging. And while Monica was running it, I don't know how the Creuset is doing today. Good products, but I know while she was here and running it, things were going up quite well. She was a tough lady to work for.
Yeah, she was one tough lady.
She was very tough. I think she was a tough lady to work for, but I think she was also an extremely fair person. I never worked for her, only as a recruiting firm. Extremely fair person, and I believe her staff trusted her and relied on her feedback. She would listen to her staff too, the feedback that I got from some of the staff that I talked to. So she's one example of a person that, in my opinion, there may be people out there who disagree with me, but in my opinion, she seemed like a pretty good leader for that company. I think she's still somehow involved, but maybe not so much for Japan.
I can't remember if she's married into the family or she's
Yes.
part of the family, so I think she's probably still involved. Anyway, whatever she's doing.
Yeah.
But, in terms of any other advice you give someone who's coming in here, should they learn Japanese?
If they're only going to be here for a short time, probably the only effort they need to learn to do in Japanese is enough to get around and not feel so dependent on everybody. It's the reason I started learning Japanese. I had a friend who spoke Japanese, and I got tired of asking him every time we would be somewhere, what'd she say? What'd he say? What are they talking about? I figured, okay, I'm just going to go learn myself and at least get to where I can understand a bit of it. If they think they're going to be here for the long haul, yes, at least to a point. They may not get to your level or my level or somebody else's that's higher than us level, but I think it helps. It also depends on the business they're in. I've seen people stand in front of a room and deliver a 30-minute speech in English, and about 90% of the people in the room are, oh, what was that? What's going on? Didn't understand a word because they refused to use an interpreter during that time. So if you're not going to learn Japanese, and you probably won't in a 2 to 3 year stint, this is not an easy language to learn, then at least get a really good interpreter and make sure you learn how to use them. That's one of the things. Japanese, to be a good leader, is not a necessary thing to have. Nice to have, but not an absolute necessity. I've coached a few people on how to get along with how to work with their Japanese staff or their counterparts. And I remember one guy who came in here with a pharmaceutical company, and he was having issues with one of his people. And we talked about how could they make the situation better. Part of it was talking with the person, understanding what they're looking for. In the end, the reality was this guy was just not a good team member. He was incompetent. And I advised, he had to make a presentation at a conference back in the US, and he put together a horrible presentation. So my advice to the guy who was an American that I was talking to was, this is going to reflect on you if he isn't able to make a decent presentation. So you're going to have to spend some time with him and help him and explain to him why you're trying to help him. And if he still wants to do the presentation his way, fine, then tell him, say, this is my presentation. Not that he's going to stand up in front of everybody and say, oh, my boss offered help and I refused it. But you have to accept that fact that not everybody's going to listen to you. I think you also have to watch the
Joe, we're the boss. Aren't they supposed to listen to us?
Well, there are bosses above the boss always, right?
And there's also that thing of, still happens, you tell someone, I want something done. And then you realize a couple of weeks later, what about that thing I wanted done? Nothing's been done. Nothing's been started. So, even still, you've got to check back and make sure people confirm what they have to do so they understand it. And, I found that, I don't understand is a terrific code word in Japan for I don't want to do it.
Right.
But I'm not going to directly tell the boss I don't want to do it for whatever reason. But I can tell the boss I don't understand. And it's like I can get away with it, So you've got to be really on the ball with things you require and checking up that it's actually being worked on.
There are certain things you need to learn in the undercurrents, I guess. If somebody tells you they're going to study it or they're going to research it, it's never going to get done. That's just not going to happen. I wrote an article and it's posted on Medium for anybody who understands or knows what Medium is. And the article's about what yes and no mean in Japan.
I'll have to go and check that article out.
Yeah, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it was something that was told to me by a Japanese person. And basically it was that if you said somebody's telling you kento shimasu, I'll study it.
My mukiri kento shimasu.
Right.
I will look at it in a forward-looking manner.
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
Or if the person tells you yes, it doesn't mean yes, we'll do it. It means yes, I heard you. That's about all it is. And his third thing was, he said, and if the person tells you no, you're not talking to a Japanese.
Yes. Well, yes, that's a classic. Yes, if they tell you no, this can't be a Japanese person. Sure.
Right.
I love that. So, Joe, what's your definition of leadership?
Of leadership? Doing the right thing at the right time. Definitely not doing the wrong thing at the wrong time or right time. But my definition, the main basic definition is lead by example. If I'm not willing to do it, how can I expect you to do it too? Now, you may be better at it, I may be better at it. Okay, if I'm better at it, then I should lead you by example and train you so the next time you can do it on your own. Recruiting company, sure, I own the majority of the company. I spend a lot of my hours doing things not related to recruiting, but I also do hands-on recruiting. And if I can't recruit somebody, then how can I expect you to recruit somebody?
Well, yes.
How can I train you
Yes.
to be a
Particularly
recruiter?
if you want hunters.
Yes.
And you're not a hunter.
Right.
Where's the credibility?
Yep.
I had a wonderful day yesterday, and why? Hunting. And I recognize in myself, I love hunting. Farming, I have to do it. Yes, I can farm, but it gets boring for me.
It is.
I like the hunt. I like to get the new client. I like to get the business in. But for other people, business comes in, they take care of it beautifully, excellent, precision, logistics, time, sequencing, cadence, the whole thing. They do a great job. Me, maybe not as great. So I think you have to recognize in yourself as a leader where your strengths are too. But if you in the sales area, if you want hunters and you're not a hunter, I don't know how the hell that's going to work.
Right. Yeah, and everybody I have now are hunters. I'm fortunate.
Yeah,
I have one in particular. He's not a recruiter. He's a sourcer. He's probably one of the best hunters in Tokyo.
Wow. Okay.
He's.
I think about it myself now. Everyone who's here, they're all hunters. We had a couple of people over the years who've been farmers, but small businesses like ours.
Yeah, you can't survive with farmers.
You need hunters. You need hunters.
I think the other thing, a leader doesn't need to take all the glory. One thing that leaders should be good at is rainmaking. And I do that fairly often, but I don't keep those. Bringing in rainmaking means bringing in new clients for us. I'll bring in a new client and I'll turn the actual search over to one of our consultants, maybe even a new consultant. I have one that I just worked with. I brought him in just a few months ago. He is Japanese. I have a client that I've worked with for years. They had a new position come up, and I told him, I said, would you like to work on this? And he did. He was successful. He found the candidate. The candidate has agreed to the offer. So I basically handed him something. It was a client. I could have gone and done this. I wouldn't have to give up any of the fees coming in. But it gives him an opportunity to have a win. And that excited him. And he's gone gangbuster since then.
His salary had a nice big commission in it. That's like bingo.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
he will.
Nice.
He doesn't get all of it because I'm not that generous. I'll keep
Okay.
part of it.
Okay.
I spent years with this client.
Yeah.
They were one of my early clients. So, but I don't have to keep everything myself. I give stuff away.
Well, good on you. Joe, thank you.
Thank you,
It's been great to have a chat, and I just should also mention you're a big wheel here in Toastmasters in Tokyo. And I've never been a member of Toastmasters, but I know that we teach public speaking, of course. But I think Toastmasters is a great organisation for people to keep going with the training we give them afterwards as well.
It is.
To keep yourself polished. And so you want to plug Toastmasters. You're at the Tokyo American Club every Wednesday?
The first and third Wednesday of every month.
Wednesday every month.
That one is limited to American Club members.
Yes, okay.
But if somebody is a Toastmaster in another club, they're welcome to attend one of our meetings.
Right.
The good thing about Toastmasters, as you said, it helps them continue with becoming better at public speaking, but it also teaches leadership. Those are the two basics of Toastmasters, public speaking and leadership. And we work on different paths, and one of the paths is leadership.
How long have you been doing that now?
10 years.
10 years, right? Okay.
Yeah, I actually established the club at the American Club, the Toastmasters Club at the American Club,
Well done.
10 years ago. I've been doing it more than 10 years,
Yeah.
about
Okay.
12 or 13 now.
All good. Well, please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.